Before my week of vacation from my retirement, playing with my grandchildren for a week, which is hard work, I recorded a podcast at God, Law, and Liberty regarding the legal advice given by a well-respected Christian lawyer to his clients, the National Religious Broadcasters Association, advising them to oppose a proposed bill in the state of Florida. Some of you may have listened to that podcast, but let me urge you to continue listening to what I have to say today, because ultimately I want to touch on something I've not touched on before, addressing the cost of discipleship in our current culture. Now, for those who didn't listen to that podcast, let me say that the legislation addressed libel and slander, which at common law is the making of a false and malicious statement against another person. Libel being slanderous words, libel being false and malicious words in writing, and slander being orally spoken words. And those words need to result in damages. But the perceived problem with this law dealt with liability for programs archived on the internet, which you could see would be a particular problem for radio stations that may have years worth of programming on their website. But what I've not really mentioned before that I want to mention today is a sort of awakening this situation has brought to me about the value of moving away from the codification of common law situations such as this. And here's the reason. Codification removes the legal grounds for a lawsuit from the common law, and the legal claim becomes one strictly of positive law, and that puts the focus on how the words in the statute should be interpreted. And the potential for problems in our culture can be easily demonstrated. For example, in our gender-confused world, a lawyer could rightly say, in response to a common law grounded lawsuit for libel or slander, that the common law only knows and recognizes male and female. But that argument can be rejected by a positivist-only judge in connection with a statute, just as Justice Gorsuch looked at the word sex in the 1968 Title VII Federal Code and gave it a modernized gender-bending definition. And not surprisingly, transgender ideology was lurking behind this Christian lawyer's legal advice to the NRB. The problem for this Christian lawyer is the proposed law allows someone who thinks they've been slandered in a prior program to sue, even though the lapse of time since that broadcast would have otherwise barred or prevented that lawsuit. This is called the statute of limitations. The vivification of the claimed archived defamation could be activated under this proposed law when an offended party provides a radio station, think BOT or Moody Radio, a, quote, notice of facts that would cause a reasonable person to conclude that such statement was false. If that notice is given and the station chooses not to take down the archived program, it could be sued. However, the notice provision did not change the requirement that the statement be proved false. So I've given more thought to what was the problem, and I suspect it was the prospect of a jury that bothered the lawyer. What probably concerned him was, and he put it in a letter, quote, a transgender male who presents as a female and competes in girls' sports. That person, according to the lawyer, quote, armed with evidence from experts who support the affirmation of gender transition, end quote, could seek relief under this legislation, quote, by claiming that this new gender is a fact. The claim would be that reasonable people would conclude that transgendered males are in fact females and should be referred to in such a manner. End quote. The concern, I suspect, is that those same kind of reasonable people might today or someday in the future be on the jury hearing the claim that the person was defamed, slandered, libeled. But what troubles me, as I think I've said before, but want to say even more clearly, is that Christian lawyers seem to have been advocating, for the most part, and defending in court legislation on this very subject on the basis of expert scientific and medical testimony that they think supports the banning of transgendered males from competing against women. Now, though, that same kind of evidence, but which cuts the other way, could be used against the Christian lawyer's client. So many Christian legal and policy advocates have agreed to play the game urged by transgender advocates, namely, that scientists and doctors should be determinative of a legal question about the nature of persons. And now, as the Florida legislation makes clear, they may find themselves hoisted on their own evidentiary petard. Playing the transgender advocates' science-only game may win in the moment. It may win for a time. But this lawyer recognizes that this game will be lost in some places, if not in more, over time. Concern for how the game will be played out in the future is reasonable, given that the parameters of the debate have now been agreed to by the lion's share of Christian lawyers. And this is where the issue of discipleship came to my mind over the last week. Preventing unnecessary lawsuits is good, and so is winning lawsuits. Helping Christian individuals and their businesses not lose money is good. At least it would appear so. But these words of the Lord about discipleship have been on my mind since that podcast. It's found in Luke 14. And there went a great multitude with him, and he turned and he said unto them, If any man come to me, and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, even his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Discipleship can be costly, but not paying the price of discipleship can be costly too. It can diminish the perception of others about how much greater is the value of the pearl of knowing Christ and being part of his kingdom. But there's also a for that follows what Jesus said. In my mind, it goes to the consequences of not giving more consideration to making science-based legal arguments on transgender issues vis-a-vis legal ones. Jesus says, For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counted the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it, lest haplessly, after he hath laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king, going to make war against another king, sitteth not down first and consulteth, whether he'll be able to with 10,000 meet him that comes against him with 20,000. Or else, while the other is yet a great way off, he sendeth an ambassador and desires conditions of peace. So, likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he hath, he cannot be my disciple. And as these words resonated in my mind, I thought, perhaps it's time to give more thought to the long-term consequences of relying in the moment on positive law and medical evidence when it comes down to defending the truth of God about man and woman. Thank you for listening.